Can one single morning destroy a person's life forever? Imagine waking up to a cruel spectacle unfolding live before thousands of eyes. A bucket of mud poured over an elderly woman's head while the world laughs and applauds from behind there. Screams, laughing emojis, empty hearts, and an influencer thriving on someone else's humiliation. If you were there, what would you do? Would you laugh along, or would your throat tighten with indignation? Pay attention, because the woman covered in mud has a story the world hasn't heard yet. When you finally discover who she truly is, it might be too late for indifference. But be warned, not everything the camera captures tells the entire truth. Behind the glamorous facade of wealth, luxury, and success lies a network of carefully hidden lies. And that influencer, the star you follow and admire, is about to fall, dragging down everything you thought you knew. A wealthy family, a hidden inheritance, a betrayal concealed for decades. Every detail will challenge your beliefs. What's the price of silence for someone who was unjustly erased from history? How far can a lie travel before it finally explodes publicly? Brace yourself, because this story won't spare anyone. Not even you. Now picture again that silent elderly woman, forgotten for years on an old bench. Who was she before she became? Nobody? What secrets does she carry inside her worn-out bag, protected as carefully as a treasure? Maybe you've walked past someone like her without noticing the lifetime stole it away. Get ready to meet a woman who chose silence not because she was weak, but because she was brave. She had a reason too powerful to speak out. And when you learn what that reason is, you'll question everything you thought you knew about forgiveness and dignity. While watching the influencer consumed by the scandal she created herself, realize that justice sometimes takes time, but never forgets. That elegant man observing quietly knows far more than he lets on. The past he tries to forget is about to return like a storm. A truth hidden in old letters, kept away by those afraid of their own guilt. How long do you think a lie can survive before it suffocates its creator? Pay close attention to every small detail in this story, because they will reveal who truly deserves redemption. And when the mask finally falls, no one will be prepared. Maybe you also have a past you're running from, uncomfortable memories you prefer to avoid. But what if the truth finds you first? Sometimes all we need to wake up is to see pain reflected in someone else's eyes. Kimberly, the powerful influencer, is about to learn this in the hardest possible way. An unexpected letter, written by the hand she believed was lost forever, is about to shake her entire life. The woman she mercilessly humiliated might be the only person capable of saving her from herself. Are you ready to see how pride can destroy everything, including the ones you love the most? This story goes beyond humiliation and redemption. It's a warning about the price we pay for our choices. Who are you really when nobody is watching? And how far would you go to protect someone you love? Prepare yourself to be confronted by the quiet strength of a woman who never had to shout to be heard. The time has come for the truth to break the silence. Take a deep breath and hold on tight, because you're about to discover the hidden power behind a single glance. After all, the mud thrown at you today could be exactly what allows something new to blossom tomorrow. But before listening to this exciting story, if you are not yet subscribed to our channel, subscribe now and become part of our community. The day started with clear skies and the scent of fresh coffee from the mall cafe. Outside, among luxury cars and mirrored storefronts, a small crowd began to form around a silent figure. It was Miss Eloise Monroe, seated in her usual spot by the plaza, wrapped in worn layers of clothing, a fabric bag in her lap, eyes cast downward. She looked like part of the scenery ignored, like a cracked sidewalk or rusted bench. But that morning, the silence shattered. A group of young influencers arrived filming. Leading them was Kimberly LaRoche, known for her outrageous live streams, grinning, holding a bucket of mud. Courage Challenge, Part 3. She shouted, her voice dripping with fake excitement. The crowd parted like it was showtime. Kimberly tossed her hair, posed, blew a kiss to her followers, and walked toward the seated woman. "Let's see if she moves." She laughed, lifting the bucket high for the camera. Laughter swelled. Her assistant filmed close-up. Eloise didn't flinch. The bucket tipped. Mud fell slowly, dripping over the scarf, her face, her shoulders. There was no scream, no reaction, just silence. A silence so heavy it made the mall's background music fade into nothing. And Kimberly smiled like she just won a game. The mud clung to her like the world had spit on her. Still, she didn't move, hands clutching the fabric bag like armor. "This is gonna blow up," someone shouted behind the camera. Emojis flooded the screen, hearts, flames, laughing faces. People pointed. Someone whispered, "She's like a statue." Kimberly turned, mocking. "I swear, she likes the attention." No one replied. Some chuckled, some filmed. But a child tugged at his mom's shirt and asked, "Mommy, why are they throwing mud on Grandma?" The mother lowered her eyes. Kimberly stepped away, wiping her hands with scented wipes. Her assistant showed her the live stream numbers. 100,000 views already, she squealed. Kimberly beamed. "Told you people love boundary breakers." But the boundary broken wasn't fashion, it was decency. A mall security guard watched but didn't intervene. Store clerks peeked through windows. One man in a suit stood silently, phone in hand. He filmed too, but his face didn't match the crowd. His hands shook, not from thrill, but shame. Sunlight bounced off the mirrored glass above Eloise, casting a strange glow around her. The mud dried on her skin. Her wrinkled hands still clutched the bag as if it held her very soul. Behind her, leaves rustled in the breeze. A pigeon landed nearby and didn't flee. Even the birds seemed to recognize the sacred weight of her silence. Eloise took a deep breath. She didn't speak. She didn't look up. The city moved on. But those who noticed saw something. A woman not broken, just no longer playing by the world's rules. As Kimberly celebrated her stats, a raw frame from the livestream began to spread. A still of Eloise, eyes downcast, dignity intact through the grime. The clerk from the suit store saved the image, not to post, not to laugh, but to remember. His fingers trembled. Something about that face, it stirred something. A memory he couldn't name, when with no sound, just wait. Kimberly entered the mall without looking back. Already planning the next stunt, maybe crash a wedding dressed as a janitor? Laughter followed her, but online, the tone shifted. Comments began to appear. Who is she? Why didn't she react? Was this staged? Sad emojis replaced flames. That screenshot of Eloise serene, muddied, circulated fast. Someone wrote, "She looks bigger than all this." It struck a nerve. Eloise never stood, never yelled, never blamed. She simply pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and gently cleaned the wooden cross hanging from her bag. Then adjusted the strap as if rearranging her soul. The motion was slow, almost sacred. Silence returned, briefly. But the city doesn't stay quiet for long. Cars, footsteps, voices. Yet for those who saw, the moment stayed. And for the man who didn't laugh, the one with the phone now tucked away, one question began to whisper in his chest. Why didn't she fight back? Asterisk, asterisk, she had always been there. Between the forgotten flower bed and the crooked tree casting uneven shade, Miss Eloise Monroe sat on the same bench every single day. A green bench, chipped and weathered by time, yet somehow stronger when she occupied it. Eloise didn't beg. She didn't shout. She simply sat, adjusted the scarf over her gray hair, opened her worn-out Bible, and sank into a silence that softened the world. Sometimes she'd sit for hours, watching shoppers come and go. Her eyes didn't judge, but they seemed to see more than anyone realized. And every now and then, she would close them and whisper a prayer, as if speaking to someone who never left her side. Shopkeepers nearby had mixed feelings. To some, she scared off customers. To others, she meant no harm, just took up space. One manager even asked to trim the tree, hoping the bench would seem less inviting. But nothing ever seemed to bother Eloise. Day after day, she returned. Her habits were predictable, her movements calm. If someone got close, they might get a tired smile and a gentle, "God bless you." Sometimes she whispered a verse as thanks. She never asked for food, never extended her hand. And still, she had more presence than men in tailored suits rushing past her. Some regulars believed she had something sacred about her. Some people were born to be heard in silence, said a florist once. Children often watched her with fascination. Occasionally, one would approach. Eloise would pull out a clean cloth, wipe the space beside her, and invite the child to sit. She'd tell short stories, always with quiet lessons tucked inside. None were about her. They felt like old fables from another era. The child would giggle, say thank you, and run back to their parents. Eloise would return to her silence, but her smile stayed just a little longer on her face. There was a hidden rhythm to her stillness. Eloise knew when the pigeons came, when the church bell rang, the moment the breeze shifted directions. Everything around her moved. And yet, she remained a still point in a spinning world. Some nights, she vanished for a few hours. Rumors said she stayed in shelters, but no one really knew. She always returned before sunrise, her clothes somehow cleaner. She never complained about the cold, or the hunger, or the loneliness. Something in her posture whispered of royalty, not of power, but of grace earned through silence. Most didn't know her last name. To them, she was just the bench lady. When the mud video went viral, shopkeepers pretended not to recognize her. Just a homeless woman, some muttered. But none of them knew what she kept inside her fabric bag, the one she held with such devotion. Tucked between her Bible and a few personal items was an old envelope, aged and yellowed, carefully folded and tied with a piece of ribbon. The name written on it, in elegant cursive, read, "To Kimberly." Eloise had been carrying it for years, waiting, in silence. No one had ever seen her open it. But every morning, before anything else, she touched it softly, closed her eyes, and prayed. It wasn't just paper. It was a promise, a memory, the last fragile bridge between her and the girl who once called her Mama. Eloise never told her story, no one asked. She watched, absorbed, forgave in silence, as if she'd made a deal with God never to return pain to the world that gave it to her. But that letter, it held everything unspoken, everything she had buried deep inside. That morning, after the humiliation, Eloise returned to her bench. She was covered in mud, but her eyes still glowed with the same peaceful light. Her old scarf dripped, but she adjusted it gently. She pulled out the envelope, held it in her lap, and stared at it for a long moment. She didn't open it. She pressed it against her chest, closed her eyes, and remained there. A woman covered in filth, embracing a letter. Around her, people walked by pretending not to see. But that image of her holding onto a fragile truth spoke louder than any video ever could. By late afternoon, the sky began to dim. The wind picked up. Eloise stayed seated, her bag now covered in a plastic sheet, her eyes turned upward as if waiting for a sign. When the first raindrop landed, she smiled and whispered, "Maybe today is the day." After that, she said nothing. She didn't move. She didn't resist. She let the rain wash away what the camera couldn't. On the sidewalk, a crumpled paper blew in the wind, landing at someone's feet. An old verse printed on it read, "The last shall be first." The next morning, the mud video was everywhere. On WhatsApp groups, downtown billboards, even on the salon TV downstairs. But what started as a joke quickly became a scandal. Outrage poured in. This is inhumane. Who allowed this? Why didn't anyone help? Miss Eloise's muddy image headlined articles as the new face of urban cruelty. Influencers across the country weighed in. Cartoonists drew her. Poets wrote verses. And the mall, once proud of its prestige, was now surrounded by shame and public pressure. Laughter had turned into crisis. Inside the stores, anxiety buzzed. Is she out there again? Managers asked. People think we support this mess. Most tried to dodge blame. We never had a problem with her, but housing the homeless isn't our job, one merchant said defensively. Others were harsher. She needs to go. She's bringing trouble. The jewelry manager called security. Within minutes, 2 uniformed guards walked toward the green bench. Eloise was reading her Bible. One of the guards cleared his throat. Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave. She looked up slowly, like waking from a dream. Her eyes moved to the men, then to the bench, then the sky. She didn't speak. She wrapped her Bible in cloth, placed it gently in her bag. Then she picked up the envelope with Kimberly written on it, handling it like something sacred, all in silence. The second guard, growing impatient, added, You heard him. You can't stay here anymore. Eloise nodded slowly, her eyes moist but steady. She stood. Her dress still carried stains of dried mud. And then she walked away. She passed through the mall like a visible ghost. People stared, but no one stepped forward. The sounds of high heels, alarm chimes, and upbeat music clashed with her quiet, heavy steps. Her wooden cross swayed gently with each movement. A child smiled at her. The mother pulled the child's arm and turned away. Eloise didn't flinch. She seemed familiar with this script. Still, there was no bitterness in her gaze. There was something deeper, resignation wrapped in dignity. Outside the mall, she stopped. She sat on a cement bench, surrounded by dry leaves and fast food wrappers. Far from authorities' eyes and closer to the breeze that still remembered her, she pulled out the envelope. She looked again at the name, Kimberly, touched the letters with her fingers like the face of someone long lost. The noise of cars and sirens faded. For the first time in years, she spoke aloud. I still love you, my girl. And then she lowered her head. Across the street, someone watched. Standing under a tree's shade, a man in a dark suit and neatly trimmed beard stared at her. He wasn't a passerby. He didn't have the indifferent gaze of strangers. His expression was different: surprise, pain, and recognition. He held a phone but wasn't recording. He gripped it tightly. His heart raced. His eyes remembered. And then, something cracked inside him. He crossed the street without a word. His steps were steady, but inside he was shaking. As he approached, his pace slowed. Eloise was still gazing at the envelope, unaware. When he stood before her, the wind lifted the corner of her headscarf. She looked up slowly. They locked eyes for seconds that felt eternal. He tried to smile, but his lips failed. Miss Eloise? He asked, his voice shaking. She nodded, said nothing, but her eyes held a full reply, and in his was a guilt buried beneath years of silence. It was Julian Carter, and he knew he'd come too late for apologies. But he could still do something. He sat beside her in silence. No justifications. No embraces, no intrusion, just presence. Eloise turned her head slightly toward him. Time passes, but truth always returns, Julian nodded. Sweat rolled down his temple despite the breeze. He felt the weight of absence pressing into his chest. But he also sensed a fragile opening, a chance to make things right. Please wait here tonight. I have something to fix. ***. Julian Carter returned to his office that afternoon with his heart in a fog. His thoughts were still anchored to the cement bench, to the eyes of the woman who raised him without ever asking for anything. He entered the sleek glass and steel building, ignoring greetings from the staff. He locked himself inside his office, turned off his phone, and sat at his desk as if carrying a body on his back. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were things no one ever saw: a rusted toy car, a beaded bracelet, and a faded photo. In it, a younger woman smiled gently, holding a little boy in her arms. It was Eloise and him, before the silence. He closed his eyes and took a long breath, digging for memories he had buried beneath excuses. He remembered the dinners where Eloise hummed while serving food, the night she covered him in a blanket, thinking he was asleep. And he remembered the day she was called a thief. He had been there. A teenager, confused, frozen. His father yelling, his mother crying. Julian said nothing. He just lowered his eyes. Eloise left that day without protest. Took only her bag and a look of goodbye he never forgot. Back then, they said she'd stolen an old necklace. Police weren't called, but the judgment came swiftly. Fired, erased, forgotten. Later, his mother confessed she never believed it, but she was too afraid to speak up. Julian had swallowed that secret like glass. Over time, he convinced himself he couldn't have done anything. But today, after seeing her again dignified, even in mud he felt the weight of his cowardice. The woman who raised him was being cast out again. And he wouldn't stay silent this time. At dusk, he locked the office and drove to his mother's old house. The family library still held boxes of journals and keepsakes. He searched shelves, opened trunks, skimmed trembling handwriting, until he found it. A blue notebook with yellowed pages marked by a delicate ribbon. On the bookmarked page, he read, "If Julian ever asks about Eloise, tell him she was the only one who helped me survive that house." Below that, "I never believed the accusation, but I was weak. May God forgive me." Julian dropped to his knees, holding the notebook to his chest. It was night when he returned to the plaza. The air was colder and the cement bench was empty. Panic surged, until he saw her silhouette further ahead, under a tree, bag beside her. She was looking up at the sky, as if expecting him. Julian approached slowly. He sat next to her with the reverence of someone sitting before an altar. He pulled the notebook from his backpack, hands trembling, and offered it to her. Eloise didn't open it. She ran her fingers across the cover. "Your mother was kind, just scared. So was I." The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. Julian wanted to apologize, but didn't know how. "You must have hated me." She shook her head gently. "You were just a boy, hurt like me." He lowered his eyes, ashamed. "We destroyed you. And still." She touched his arm softly. "You didn't destroy me. I stayed standing. I'm still here." Julian cried quietly, deeply, like someone finally emptying out guilt. When he calmed down, he pulled a small dinner from his bag. Simple. Warm. He also brought a blanket. Eloise smiled. She ate in silence, as if each bite mended something inside. Then, she looked at him with eyes that held. "Beginnings. Why did you come back?" "Because I remembered what matters. What you taught me." She squeezed his hand. "There's still time." He nodded, resolute. "Tomorrow, we start making this right. I promise." She didn't reply. Just looked at the stars. Before leaving, Eloise pulled the old envelope from her bag, the one with Kimberly's name. She handed it to Julian. "If anything happens to me, this must reach her." He held the envelope gently, like fragile glass. "Is she your daughter?" "She's my girl." Julian nodded. He placed the letter inside his suit pocket. "I'll take it. And I'll find a way to make her listen." Eloise smiled. For the first time, her face looked lighter. Midnight fell like a veil over the city, and the plaza where Eloise slept seemed frozen in time. The cement bench was damp, the wind carried dry leaves, and the starless sky hung heavy above. But Eloise wasn't asleep. She sat upright, blanket around her shoulders, her bag in her lap, eyes wide open, as if guarding a secret. In her hand, she slowly turned the envelope with her niece's name. Her fingers traced its edges, feeling the years sewn into the folds. She knew the time was coming. And her heart, though worn and quiet, still beat faster when it thought of Kimberly. Even after everything, Julian arrived silently. He carried his mother's journal, but this time he brought more. In his hand was a smaller envelope, sealed with aged wax. He sat beside Eloise and handed her the warm meal without a word. She ate slowly, quietly. Then he pulled the journal from his backpack and opened it to the marked page. "There's something you need to read now," Eloise nodded. She took the notebook with steady hands and began to read. The words of the woman who had once been her employer flowed like a confession. "I was a coward, Eloise. I knew you were innocent, and still, I let them send you away." Eloise's hands trembled slightly. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. That sentence weighed heavier than the mud from days before. It was as if the world finally admitted what she had always known, but never had the voice to say she knew. Julian kept his gaze low. "I should have spoken. Should have done something. But I hid." Eloise stopped him with a soft gesture. "You were a child. I forgive you, Julian. What matters is now." She placed her hand over his. And for a moment, the silence wasn't pain. It was healing. Julian pulled out the sealed envelope, handed it to Eloise. "She wrote this but never had the courage to send it. She asked me to keep it, and now it's yours." Eloise opened the envelope gently. Inside was a short letter, written in steady blue ink. She read in silence, tears rising with each line. "You were more than a maid. You were sister, mother, friend. I lost you to pride. May God reward you for what I never could." When she finished reading, Eloise pressed the paper to her chest, closing her eyes as if hugging the past, and whispered, "Amen." With the letter resting in her lap, Eloise reached into her bag and pulled out her own envelope, the one she'd carried for years. She looked at Julian, her voice soft but sure. "Now it's your turn." He opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in delicate cursive, but its contents hit him like thunder. It told everything: the day of the argument, the lie from a greedy relative, and Eloise's decision to stay silent to protect the child she loved as her own, Kimberly. At the end, just one line: "One day she will need the truth, Julian." Read the letter twice, then looked at Eloise like someone witnessing a miracle that survived the storm. She needs to know. She will, when she's ready. What if she rejects it? Eloise smiled softly. "She doesn't have to love me. She just has to know who I was, and what I never stopped being." Julian swallowed hard. "You were more of a mother than most ever are." Eloise turned her face, letting a single tear fall. "She's still my girl." The sky was beginning to lighten, tinged with soft blues and pinks on the horizon. Eloise stood slowly, stretching her back and gazing upward. "Today, I'm going back to my tent. I need to write another letter." Julian nodded, still holding her envelope. "Are you sure? Now I have peace. And when the soul quiets, the words find their way." She walked slowly through the plaza, her wooden cross swinging with each step. Julian stayed behind, staring at the envelope, feeling its weight and its purpose. Finally, he smiled, as if beginning to understand. Back in her tent, Eloise took out an old notebook and a blue pen. She knelt, lit a small makeshift candle in a jar, and began to write. She wrote as if each line stitched wounds back together. Not to explain, but to leave a record. When finished, she folded the letter and wrote her niece's full name on the front, Kimberly Rose LaRoche. She placed the letter beside her Bible. Then she prayed. She didn't ask for anything, only gave thanks. And then she slept. For the first time in years, rest came without weight. Kimberly LaRoche woke up with swollen eyes and a heavy head. Her phone screen flashed over 300 unread messages. Notifications exploded like grenades, brands cutting ties, followers disappearing. Hashtags demanding accountability. The Mud Bucket livestream had gone global. She tried to explain herself and her stories, but every sentence made it worse. It was just a joke. She didn't say anything. No one got hurt. The replies came like waves. You humiliated an elderly woman. This isn't entertainment. Kimberly screamed and threw her phone against the mirror. The glass cracked, so did the image she had of herself. The once spotless apartment was now a mess. Food containers on the floor, makeup smeared across counters, dirty glasses in the sink. Sitting on the couch in her silk pajamas, Kimberly shook. She never imagined anything could threaten her image, the image she'd built for years, filter by filter, pose by pose. The phone rang. Her agent. She answered. Kim, the brands are out. The makeup deal, canceled. Kimberly closed her eyes and leaned her head against the wall. But I am the brand. Not anymore. People saw the real you. And they didn't like it. She hung up without goodbye. Set frozen as sunlight hit her face, exposing dark circles no concealer could hide. On the wall hung a photo of her with her grandfather. She was a child, holding the school award. Eloise stood in the background, almost out of frame, wearing a soft smile. Kimberly had never noticed her before, but now that smile, it said something. Her chest tightened. A memory surfaced, but she pushed it away. She ruined everything. She always ruins everything. And she cried, alone, for the first time without a camera. Online, people dug into her past. Old videos, edited photos, everything was picked apart. One influencer exposed her fake charity claims. Another accused her of buying followers. Kimberly tried to fight back, but every word sounded rehearsed. She no longer knew how to speak without a script. She felt trapped. It's not fair. I just wanted to be somebody. As a child, she dreamed of being seen. She grew up believing fame would erase the sting of being abandoned. But now, exposed to the world, she was that little girl again, alone, with nothing. Exhausted, she opened a box of old fan gifts, things she used to treat like trophies. Letters, perfumes, charm bracelets. At the bottom, an envelope stood out, aged paper. Familiar handwriting. Her heart raced. This wasn't here before. She held the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting was soft, round, unmistakable. To my girl. With all the love that time could not erase. Signed, Aunt Eloise. Kimberly dropped to the floor, clutching the envelope to her chest. And the past came knocking. She couldn't open it at first. She just cried. Not the performative cry of social media. This one came with sobs, with pain long buried. She remembered hugs, mashed bananas for breakfast, and whispered prayers. She remembered the lullaby Eloise used to hum while brushing her hair. She took care of me. The memory returned, vivid and full. Kimberly, small, falling asleep in her aunt's lap while her mother worked late. Eloise had been presence, had been home. And Kimberly had forgotten it all. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written with care. Every word felt like a distant embrace. Eloise didn't make excuses. She simply told the truth. She spoke of being cast out, of choosing silence to protect Kimberly. She said she still prayed for her, that she still called her my girl every night, that she hoped one day God would let the truth find its way. Kimberly read it aloud. Why? But deep down she knew. Because Eloise loved her. In a way she hadn't yet understood. With the letter in her lap, Kimberly lay on the living room floor. Her face pressed against the envelope, eyes red, chest heaving. The world outside kept spinning, ruthless. But inside that crumbling apartment, a woman was beginning to fall apart. And maybe, just maybe, to be rebuilt. I need to see her. The words left her lips as a whisper, but they held weight. She stood, slowly, walked to the cracked mirror, wiped her face, tied her hair back. And for the first time in years, she didn't reach for her phone. Kimberly didn't sleep that night. Eloise's letter stayed beside her, like a living presence. With every line she reread, memories returned stronger. The smell of oatmeal, lullabies before bed, the soft rattle of prayer beads in her aunt's hands. Things buried beneath years of resentment, inherited bitterness, and twisted stories. For the first time she asked herself, what if everything they told me was a lie? Deep down, she had always felt something missing, a hole no one explained. But she never dared to question it. Now she couldn't run from it anymore. With red eyes and a freshly washed face, Kimberly dug through an old box in her closet. She found folders, childhood notebooks, photographs. One drawing caught her breath. A child holding Eloise's hand, a heart drawn between them. On the back, dated 2001, were shaky letters. My aunt who I love. Kimberly pressed her hands to her mouth. A knot tightened in her chest. She was everything to me. Then why was she erased? Why was she told Eloise stole money and vanished? Why was no one ever interested in her side of the story? She already knew who spread the lie. The same relative who inherited most of the estate, despite having no real connection to the family. A manipulative man who used division to stay in control. Eloise had been the perfect target, poor, female, a housekeeper. Kimberly, still a child, believed what she was told. Grew up thinking her aunt had betrayed them. And now, she felt ashamed. A shame deeper than any public scandal. It was personal, intimate, a wound denied for too long. She opened her phone, not to post, but to make sense of everything. She started a note listing childhood memories. Compared them to the truths she had been taught. Line by line, the lie unraveled, and Eloise began to reappear in her mind. Not as a martyr, not as a saint, but as a real woman who loved, who was hurt, who protected in silence. Kimberly wept again, but now with the pain of waking up and realizing she had stood on the wrong side of the story. For too long, before sunrise she got dressed. No makeup, no heels. She wore jeans, a simple shirt, tied her hair back in a loose bun. She walked through the quiet streets of Atlanta, clutching the letter to her chest. She wanted to see her, needed to. Not to film, not to post, but because she missed her. Missed the scent, the warmth, the voice. Missed something fame never replaced. Something she only saw when it almost vanished. Reaching the plaza, she spotted the green bench from afar. Her heart raced. She walked faster, almost ran. But when she arrived, the bench was empty. No bag, no blanket, no scarf, just faint markings on the ground where someone had clearly been and left early. Kimberly looked around, scanning the park. Auntie? The wind blew hard. Leaves circled her feet. And in that moment, she felt a strange kind of emptiness. Not just absence, but urgency. She sat on the bench, hands trembling. For a second, she feared it was too late. But then, carved faintly into the wood, she noticed something. A sentence scratched in with a knife or key. Love sees even in the dark. Kimberly ran her fingers across the words, as if touching something sacred. She cried, silently. She knew Eloise had been there. And somehow still was, in everything she left unsaid, in everything she gave without asking. She read the letter again, right there on the bench, from start to finish, then folded it carefully. Like an inheritance, she stayed for a while, just waiting, not sure if Eloise would return. But something inside her said this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a search, not just for her aunt, but for herself, for the part she denied out of pride, anger, and fear. "I'll find you, even if it's through silence." She stood up, and with steady steps, walked toward the neighborhood church. The next morning, the mall corridors felt colder. Some stores were shuttered, others posted quiet signs asking for respect and dignity. But behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. Shop owners grew uneasy with the online buzz. Miss Eloise, once invisible, had become an uncomfortable symbol. "She turned into a martyr overnight," muttered the gallery owner. "It's hurting our sales." The merchants gathered for an urgent meeting. Their solution: shut it all down. Bury the noise. But it was too late. The city was waking up. That morning, Julian Carter did something no executive had done before. He opened his rarely used personal account and posted an old photo of him as a boy, sitting on Eloise's lap, both smiling. The caption read, "She's not just a homeless woman. She's part of my story, and she deserves respect." The post went viral within hours. Others began sharing stories: students, nurses, former employers. All echoed the same truth: she helped me, she prayed with me, she showed up. Miss Eloise became a symbol not of charity, but of awakening. When Kimberly saw Julian's post, her chest tightened. That was the boy Eloise always spoke of with love. She reposted it, this time without a curated caption. Just a single sentence: "This woman raised me. I didn't know how much that saved me." The post stirred mixed reactions. Some called it PR spin, others saw a shift. But through the noise, something new began to surface: respect, and a shared desire to find Eloise, to apologize, even without knowing the whole story. The mall's administration rushed to contain the damage. They issued a statement: "We remain committed to inclusion and dignity for all." No one bought it. A former employee revealed Eloise had been forcibly removed without a single word of apology. The damage was done. Institutional silence no longer protected anyone. Fueled by something deeper than fear, Kimberly decided to act. She questioned store owners, pushed for answers, searched for leads. But all she heard was, "We don't know." "She's gone." Desperate, Kimberly returned to the plaza bench. She brought flowers, a handwritten letter, and her childhood favorite buttered bread with warm milk. She sat for hours, waiting, watching. With every passing moment, the guilt grew heavier. But so did a new desire, not just to make things right, but to make something better. A woman sat beside her and said, "You're her niece, aren't you?" Kimberly turned, startled. The woman smiled. She used to come to the church on Wednesdays to pray for her nieces. Kimberly's throat closed. The woman gave her directions. A small, quiet church tucked between trees just a few blocks away. Kimberly took off running. Her heart pounded. As she moved, childhood flashes returned: Eloise tying her shoelaces, laughing softly when Kimberly painted her nails with markers, whispering prayers before school tests. It was all love. It had always been there. She just hadn't seen it. Not until now. As she neared the church, she smelled old wood and melted wax. The door was slightly open. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the sacred hush. The wooden pews were empty. Sunlight poured through stained glass, painting the floor in red and blue. And at the front, kneeling, was Eloise. Her head covered in a scarf, rosary in hand, her fabric bag beside her. She didn't turn. But somehow, she already knew. Kimberly stood still, then walked toward her. She knelt beside her aunt, said nothing. Just cried. Eloise kept her eyes closed, whispering her prayer, a prayer that asked forgiveness and gave it too, a prayer of thanks. For everything, even what was lost. When she finished, she opened her eyes slowly and saw her niece. "I knew you'd come," Kimberly broke. "Please forgive me." Eloise embraced her. Not like someone returning, but like someone who had never left. The photo of Kimberly and Eloise embracing inside the church spread without captions, filters, or hashtags. A quiet witness had taken the image and posted it with the caption, "She forgave her. And us, what will we do?" In under an hour, the scene lit up newspapers, neighborhood groups, church circles, and activist pages. But behind the viral image, something even deeper was unfolding. Julian, with the letters and diary in hand, filed a motion to reopen the LaRoche family will. What was once rumor became case. What was once silence became evidence. And what had been erased was finally named. The judge accepted the request almost without hesitation. Public attention and new evidence made the case undeniable. Julian's mother's journal, Eloise's letter, and Kimberly's emotional testimony formed a new, more honest story. Even Julian's lawyer, used to cold corporate lawsuits, left the courthouse with wet eyes. This isn't about money. It's about dignity. Justice didn't weep, but it listened. The hearing was approved. And within days, the final decision was scheduled. What waited inside that courtroom wasn't just a verdict. It was history being restored. Eloise arrived on time, wearing her same headscarf and fabric bag. She walked like someone who knew where she belonged, even after being pushed away for years. When she took her seat, the courtroom fell into complete silence. All eyes were on her, but she stared at no one. Only inward. When asked if she wished to reclaim assets, wealth, or property, she answered calmly, "What I lost can't be measured in numbers. But the truth, I've carried it every day." The judge nodded, visibly moved. The gavel came down. And Eloise Monroe was declared the rightful heir. Kimberly sat in the front row, her eyes brimming. The recognition of Eloise didn't diminish her, it freed her. For the first time, she didn't have to hide behind status, sponsors, or followers. After the ruling, she rose slowly and walked to her aunt. She knelt down, her voice breaking. "You gave me everything, and I nearly destroyed it." Eloise smiled gently and held her hands. "What comes from love doesn't break. It just gets lost for a while," they embraced. And something deeper than legal justice was restored. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Hand-painted signs read, "She stood tall, and we hear the unheard." When Eloise stepped out, no one screamed. There was only silence. A silence so full it could burst. Someone began clapping slowly. The rest followed. Eloise didn't wave. She only looked around, her eyes full of something sacred. Kimberly walked beside her. No makeup, no phone. She was not a brand anymore. She was a woman rebuilding. Julian followed, the old brooch pinned to his blazer. 3 stories once separated, now walking as one. Days later, Kimberly made the hardest decision of her public life. She posted a raw video. No edits, no lighting, no brand deals. Just her. Face bare, voice shaking, she told the truth. The story of her aunt, the lie she had believed, the pain she had caused. She asked forgiveness not for applause, but because she needed to breathe again. "If I'm going to influence anyone, now let it be for what matters." She pledged to give up assets gained through the false will, and promised to use what remained to make things right, even if it was never enough. Eloise turned down every talk show, every political award. She didn't want a spotlight. She wanted purpose. In the old notebook she kept tucked in her bag, she started listing names of women she met on the street. Forgotten faces, broken stories. She invited Julian and Kimberly to help. And there, in the small house she now owned, a new vision was born. I want a place where no woman is treated the way I was. It was the birth of the Voices Unseen Foundation, not grand, but rooted. And it would begin right where she was once pushed away. At the end of that week, Eloise announced a press conference, simple, quiet, held in the city's old community theater. Hand-painted banners hung above the door. Inside, plastic chairs and the scent of wood and wax. When she stepped onto the stage, she didn't read a speech. She spoke with her soul. They erased me. But God wrote me again. She shared her story, her wounds, her faith, and her plans. Now I want to help write new stories with you. And she revealed the foundation's new home, in the very building next to the mall. Asterisk asterisk on the morning of the announcement, the old warehouse next to the mall looked like a different place. The shattered windows had been replaced by open frames with soft curtains dancing in the breeze. Hand-painted signs with phrases of strength covered the walls. Here, no one is invisible, read one of them. A group of young volunteers arranged. Simple chairs, aligned like a classroom for the heart. Kimberly arrived early, wearing jeans and a plain white shirt. In her hands was a notebook, not her phone. Eloise, seated in the back, watched it all with moist eyes. There was silence. But the kind of silence that breathes. The kind that only exists after pain. The room filled quickly. Women of all ages, with eyes shaped by stories the world chose to ignore. There they were, former maids, women humiliated online, caregivers, single mothers, teens crushed by viral videos. None came for pity, they came for dignity. Julian coordinated the press quietly. No red carpet, no spotlight, just truth. When Eloise stepped onto the small wooden platform, all sound ceased. She held no microphone. No speech, just her old fabric. Bag frayed but unbroken. And the wooden cross pinned to her scarf, now shining like a quiet crown. For a long time, they called me nothing, Eloise said, locking eyes with the women. But even when the world said I was nothing, God kept calling me by name. A breath passed through the crowd. I wasn't made for revenge. I was made to care, and those who care never forget others' pain. She paused. Wind tapped against the windows like nature listening in. The Voices Unseen Foundation is born today. Not as a trophy, but as an answer. A gentle clap began in the back row and spread like seeds blown by time, soft but unstoppable. Kimberly was invited to the stage. She walked slowly, shoulders low with humility, but eyes steady with resolve. My name used to stand for arrogance, but I want it to stand for service now. Eloise looked at her with quiet affection. You're still my girl. And in front of everyone, Kimberly received her volunteer badge. She smiled like someone beginning again. I'll learn from every story and write mine with no filters. She sat beside Eloise, and for the first time, they felt like family. Again, not online, but real. In the next room, there were framed photos of anonymous women. One showed a young Eloise holding a girl with braided hair, Kimberly. Another captured a woman in an apron, smiling while serving coffee. The caption read, "This woman lost everything, except her faith." Julian guided visitors through the space. A quiet prayer corner, a small library with books on dignity and rights, a community kitchen already smelling of fresh bread. It wasn't glamorous, but it was sacred. Every detail whispered, "You matter." And that meant more than any fortune. Outside, the press waited, but Eloise didn't give interviews. She left a handwritten note at the entrance. Sometimes God uses silence as a megaphone. She wasn't after headlines. She came to sow. And she knew the best seeds grow in broken soil. A young woman approached and gently took her hand. I was exposed online. They called me everything. But seeing you gives me hope. Eloise smiled and handed her a small note. A verse from Philippians. And then, silence again. In the days that followed, women arrived from other cities. Some came to speak, others just to listen. The foundation became a shelter, a beacon, a mirror. Kimberly began helping with workshops on mindful social media. Julian built a legal support network, and Eloise. She poured coffee with worn hands, listened without rushing, and prayed without a sound. She didn't seek a stage. She sought legacy. And in that old, restored building, a new generation learned the power of starting over. There was no luxury, but there was light. At the foundation's door, someone hung a wooden sign. In this place, mud becomes root. Eloise ran her fingers across the words and smiled. She looked at her fabric bag, her cross, the sky. There lay everything that remained, and everything that mattered. On the last day of the month, she wrote a single line in her journal. The world laughed at me with mud. But God used the mud to grow something that bloomed in silence. And closed her eyes, finally at peace. Some stories don't end with applause, but with teary eyes and silently stirred hearts. What we witnessed wasn't just a twist, it was a reminder that dignity, even when covered in mud, never loses its worth. Miss Eloise Monroe never shouted, never begged, never sought revenge. She simply waited. Waited for time to reveal what rushed eyes had ignored, the strength hidden in gentleness, the power contained in silence. Kimberly, on the other hand, had to lose everything to find the roots of her own humanity. Sometimes, only by falling do we remember what truly matters. And some wounds, when embraced, become bridges instead of walls. With every opened letter, with every memory restored, something was rebuilt. It wasn't just a fortune that changed hands, but an entire narrative rewritten with courage and truth. Eloise never wanted palaces, spotlights, or fame. She wanted purpose. And through the voice's unseen foundation, she turned shame into foundation, humiliation into hope. Her story isn't just hers, it belongs to every silenced woman, every distant child, every gaze that was once ignored. Because when someone dares to love without bitterness, even what was violently taken returns in the form of blooming grace. Justice, when joined with mercy, heals even the oldest scars. And you? Have you ever stopped to consider who you might have excluded out of pride, haste, or sheer distraction? Has an Eloise ever passed through your life, and you simply didn't notice? Or deep down, do you carry an untold story of your own, waiting for the courage to speak? Maybe it's time to look back and write letters you never dared to write. Maybe it's time to ask for forgiveness or offer it, even when it hasn't been requested. Time doesn't erase the truth. It only buries it ... until someone is brave enough to dig. And every scar that once bled in silence carries the power to heal another soul. It doesn't matter if the world pushed you down, covered you in shame, or silenced you when all you wanted was to be seen. Life doesn't end on the torn pages. It begins again when you choose to tell your version. With faith, with courage, with love for those who may never understand how deeply they hurt you. Eloise chose not to be a prisoner of bitterness, and by doing so, became something greater than justice, a symbol of redemption. That park bench, now empty, will never again be just old wood. It will be remembered as the altar where truth once sat, waiting for its moment. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Maybe you're the missing piece between someone's pain and their healing. Maybe someone out there has been waiting for this very message to remember that there's still time. Because where there is silence ... there is still hope. And even when everything seems lost, God is still at work in the margins, the moments, and the unlikely encounters. Mud dries, shame fades, But love, true love, always finds a way to bloom.